In India, a truly ancient legend, predating even Hinduism, tells of a large island of incomparable beauty. A very long time ago, that island was located in the center of a vast inland sea in Central Asia, just north of the Himalayas as we know them today. On this isolated island, a race of near-divine people, possessing strange powers, lived and thrived. They did not communicate with the outside world except through a series of deep tunnels. These tunnels stretched in all directions, some hundreds, even thousands of miles long, dug deep beneath entire continents and even through the oceans. In this peaceful oasis, their society flourished at an extraordinary pace. Science and art blossomed, never threatened by war or disease. They deliberately hid themselves to protect their priceless treasury of knowledge from the calamities that frequently ravaged their fellow beings in the outside world. But a terrible force was about to descend upon the earth, and even this utopian paradise would be destroyed if they remained. Perhaps it was a great flood, or an invading force of epic proportions. The exact reason is no longer known. But the story tells that the island's people escaped. They moved their entire society into those very tunnels. They rebuilt their civilization entirely underground. They were no longer an island, but a subterranean kingdom. They left no trace on the surface, except for the tunnel entrances, most of which have collapsed or been hidden over thousands of years. On our journey tonight, this lost empire will be known by the name Agartha. It is said that the hidden paths to Agartha still exist. They are believed to be located in the ancient ruined cities of India, such as the Ellora, Elephanta, and Ajanta caves. Other entrances are rumored to lie deep in the canyons of Afghanistan, in the Hindu Kush range. The legend of this island is particularly strange, because if taken in an absolutely literal sense, there is clearly no ocean north of the Himalayas. Instead, there is only the endless aridness of the Taklamakan and Gobi deserts. But if we were to take an arduous trek up the soaring, weather-beaten peaks of Everest, K2, or Kanchenjunga, you might be advised not to trip. Not on rocks, but on the countless fish bones, coral reef remnants, and sea lily fossils scattered across some of the highest peaks. This is a little-known fact. The majestic Himalayas, often called the roof of the world, were once entirely underwater. That was the ancient Tethys Sea. Its existence predates the enormous geological event known as continental drift. When the Indian plate violently collided with the Eurasian plate, where it still remains today, the immense pressure pushed the seabed upward, forming the mountain range. But what about the tunnels? The tunnels that supposedly stretch across the world? Why do parallel myths of gods or near-divine peoples living in vast underground cities protected from surface catastrophes appear in traditions and cultures on multiple continents, from Africa to the Americas, and then Asia? These stories originate from the dawn of civilizations, and they are perpetuated by men who, through eyewitness accounts, have claimed to have visited this lost civilization inside the earth. The concept of Agartha, at first glance, seems simple: a kingdom inside the earth, linked to every continent by a vast network of tunnels. But our investigation is not easy. For a subject so vast and ancient, often distorted by conspiracy theories, the truth of an inner civilization that may still exist lies hidden. It lies in obscure documents, in the riddles of Buddhist lamas, and in the lost teachings of an organization called the Sect of Agartha. But perhaps we should begin our story with a studious Frenchman, a philosopher named Alexandre Saint-Yves, and the strange circumstances that led him to this secret world, accidentally unleashing it into the Western mind, where the land of Agartha continues to be rumored and even sought to this very day. Today, Alexandre Saint-Yves is an obscure, almost unknown figure, but in the 19th century, the works and teachings of this respected philosopher and occultist laid the foundation for the French esoteric tradition, and this, in large part, was thanks to his unquenchable curiosity about the mysteries of the world. After having gathered much profound wisdom through studying ancient Hebrew for his breakthrough work, The Mission of the Jews, Saint-Yves yearned to deepen his understanding of the world even further. He wanted to unlock more secrets through an even more ancient language, Sanskrit, the ancestor of all modern Indo-European languages. And in 1885, he hired a tutor. Through a mutual connection, Saint-Yves was introduced to a man calling himself Prince Harji Sharif, an impressive scholar who supposedly left India after the uprising of 1857 and came to France, opening a bird shop and presenting himself as a professor of Oriental languages. However, his true origins were very vague. It has long been thought that Harji was actually Afghan and perhaps used an alias. Even so, the surviving manuscripts of their lessons, now preserved at the Sorbonne Library and written in an exquisite script, prove that he was highly educated in what he taught and likely belonged to the nobility. The mystery of Agartha, in fact, was seated in the very title of their first lesson. One manuscript clearly states, "First lesson in the Sanskrit language for the Marquis Saint-Yves d'Alvedre, Paris, June 8, 1885, by teacher and Professor H.S. Bhagwandas of the great Agartha school." Saint-Yves immediately asked his teacher intently, "What is this great Agartha school?" He received only vague answers and was told to continue the lesson. But the French occultist did not give up easily. He studied with Harji 3 times a week. Many notebooks were filled, not only with Sanskrit lessons, but also with excerpts from their informal conversations. In these notes, strange phrases began to appear, elements for the Agarthan ritual, only for the initiated, the holy land of Agartha, and an obsessive question, how could he have left Agartha? Throughout their lessons, a picture gradually emerged. Harji had spoken a great deal to Saint-Yves about a certain land of Agartha and about its mysterious protector, the master of the universe, a being who, in many ways, was a transcendent creature in both spirit and body compared to anyone else in the world. Whatever Agartha truly was, this kingdom was said to be the preserver of great wisdom and ancient knowledge. In particular, it held something Saint-Yves was deeply interested in, a secret writing system of 22 characters called Vatanian. Harji told him that Vatanian originated from the very dawn of civilization, precisely in 51,900 BC, the time of the confusion of tongues. And since then, it had been preserved solely inside the protected libraries of Agartha. Harji could write this strange language as fluently and beautifully as his French and Sanskrit. For Saint-Yves, long obsessed with the secret and sacred origins of language, this was the key. In one note, Harji wrote his student's name in Vatanian characters with a message beside it. A warning, "Here, as per your earnest wish, but truly you are not yet prepared enough for Vatanian, slowly but surely." It is very likely that Saint-Yves did this without his teacher's knowledge or permission. He had accumulated incredibly detailed notes from his time studying with Harji Sharif and compiled them into a book. Its title was The Mission of India in Europe, The Mission of Europe in Asia. This work, without a doubt, is the first thorough description of Agartha in the Western world. Listen carefully, as these details will become important when we cross-reference them with other sources later. According to Saint-Yves, the hidden land of Agartha lies deep beneath the Earth's surface, somewhere in the mountains of the Himalayas. It is a colossal underground complex of cities with a population of millions. It is ruled by a supreme pontiff, known as the Brahmatma. Assisting him are two colleagues, the Mahatma and the Mahanga, who uphold the highest values within their authority. As guardians of knowledge, the entire collected wisdom of the ages is preserved in enormous stone libraries, engraved on pillars in the mysterious Vatanian script itself. He went on to reveal that the Agarthan civilization had once existed on the surface, but they were driven underground and hidden from the rest of the world at the beginning of the Kali Yuga, the current dark cycle of Hindu cosmology, around 3200 BC. There is a prophecy that Agartha will reveal itself to the surface world again, but only when the world above achieves spiritual balance in our governance. For a long time, this hidden civilization has enjoyed technological advancement at a much faster rate than us, including gas lighting, railways, and even air travel. And in describing one of their most remarkable technologies, Saint-Yves accurately predicted fiber optics, more than a century before its invention. He described, quote, electric pathways, not made of steel, but of flexible glass, which do not recklessly deplete the planet's carbon reserves, nor weigh it down with an iron framework, which is no less conducive to the spread of certain cosmic plagues. Although Agarthan society flourished largely in complete isolation, they still carefully documented the discoveries of modern humans, even from the most remote regions, by means of a vast network of tunnels stretching across the Earth. But despite this, the Agarthans had evolved separately from the rest of the world for so many years that they had developed two tongues, a strange biological detail that Saint-Yves was particularly fond of sharing, allowing them to speak two languages at the same time. As an uncompromising literalist, the mission of India was not intended to be read as an allegory or fantasy. The French occultist was completely serious in every word he wrote. He presented Agartha as a real geographical location, a place that could be found if one knew where to look. The lessons continued, 3 times a week, and Harji would sign his initials on each page of Saint-Yves' notebooks as a sign of approval. But as the notebooks and lessons continued, his signature became more scribbled and abstract. Increasingly, he became less careful when signing, until his initials were nothing more than a small cross. Finally, his mark disappeared permanently, and that was also when their Sanskrit lessons ended, for unknown reasons. Around the same time, hundreds of copies of Saint-Yves' The Mission of India had been printed and were ready for distribution throughout France. Then suddenly he withdrew the book and ordered every copy burned. The only copy that survived was a manuscript in his personal estate, and it would have probably been lost to oblivion. But Saint-Yves, who had no children, left his estate to his stepson. Later, they were passed on to the famous French occultist, Dr. Gerard Uncas, also known as Pappus. When Pappus published The Mission of India in 1910, he omitted certain parts of the manuscript, parts that remain lost to this day. Many theories have been put forward as to why Saint-Yves ordered the destruction of his precious work. Some sources suggest he acted on the orders of the great Agartha school, because the wisdom revealed would not be understood, and publishing it would be like casting pearls before swine. While others go so far as to say he was threatened with the blade of the initiated if he dared to reveal their secrets about Agartha. Whatever the real reason, Saint-Yves held firm to his belief in the lost civilization, as evidenced by his mention of Agartha and its 3 rulers in later works, and in private conversations, he still insisted on their existence. But why? Why did Alexandre Saint-Yves find this strange and fantastical idea of Agartha not only fascinating, but truly credible? We can guess that. During his earlier time, studying Hebrew and researching the Jewish tradition of Kabbalah, he had encountered an ancient revelation that the Garden of Eden was not just a utopian paradise, but a physical paradise located in an actual location on Earth. More precisely, deep inside the planet, and it could be accessed by passing through a cave. Specifically, the real location known as the Cave of the Patriarchs, Cave of Machpelah, considered one of the holiest pilgrimage sites in both Judaism and Islam. As stated in the Zohar, the foundational work of Jewish Kabbalah, the Garden of Eden should indeed be considered an inner earth kingdom. This parallel is not surprising, because the belief in another, more sacred world inside our planet is easily one of the most consistent motifs in global mythology. The Navajo believed their ancestors emerged from an underworld. The Aztecs believed they were one of 7 tribes to come out of the caves of Aztlan. The leaders of the Creek tribes stated clearly that the earth opened in the west and the Creeks came out. The Zuni believed that in the old days, all humans lived in caves in the center of the earth, and once again, the tunnels. An old Apache legend tells of a long, deep cave in Arizona, said to lead to an inner earth kingdom, inhabited by a mysterious tribe. As the influential Assyriologist Archibald Sayce wrote, "There was a dwelling which the gods created for the first human beings, a dwelling in which they became great and multiplied, and its location is described in words which correspond exactly with the accounts of Iran, India, China, the Edda, and the Aztec, located in the center of the earth." St. Yves's retelling would probably have been forgotten, dismissed as a wild fever of the imagination, were it not for a Polish scientist named Ferdynand Ossendowski. In 1922, Ossendowski published the book Beasts, Men, and Gods. It was an account of his perilous escape into Central Asia, fleeing the Bolsheviks after the Russian Revolution. Dr. Ossendowski recounted that, throughout his journey in Mongolia, there were many times when both men and beasts would suddenly stop. They would stand motionless, dead silent, often bowing low, their attention completely fixed on the ground. He wrote, quote, "The earth and sky ceased to breathe. The wind did not blow and the sun did not move. All living beings, in fear, were involuntarily thrown into prayer and awaited their fate. Finally, he asked an old Mongolian shepherd he had befriended what was happening in those moments. It has always been so," the shepherd explained. "Whenever the king of the world, in his subterranean palace, prays and searches for the destiny of all peoples on earth." Although the shepherd did not name the place, he said that there resided the invisible rulers of all pious people. At the head was the king of the world, or Brahitma, who can speak with God as I speak with you, and his 2 assistants, Mahitma, who knows the purpose of future events, and Mahinga, who rules over the causes of those events. "He knows all the forces of the world," said the shepherd, "and reads all the souls of humankind, and the great book of their destiny." This story haunted Dr. Ossendowski throughout his journey. He frequently stopped to speak with Buddhist monks and lamas about the traditions related to caves, underground vaults, and tunnels in the region. Many times a name for that place was given, the Kingdom of Agartha, a place he himself called the Mystery of Mysteries. This subterranean source of power was said to transmit a magical energy to the Tibetan monks, and especially to the Dalai Lama, powers that outsiders could hardly begin to comprehend. But there still existed a man more powerful than even the Dalai Lama, the king of the world in Agartha. His enormous power was such that he could destroy entire regions of the planet at will if he so chose, and it could also be harnessed, for example, as a means of propulsion for vehicles. Ossendowski's modern readers point out that his 1922 account is a possible prediction of nuclear energy, such as the atomic bomb and nuclear-powered aircraft, a real technology today but still considered too dangerous for civilian purposes. There are many obvious similarities in the accounts of Dr. Ossendowski and St. Yves, most notably the concept of a hidden underground kingdom named Agartha versus St. Yves's Agartha, and its triune spiritual authority called Brahitma, Mahitma, and Mahinga versus Brahatma, Mahatma, and Mahanga. At first glance, we might think that Ossendowski simply plagiarized St. Yves, who had written The Mission of India 36 years before Ossendowski's account was published. This would seem to be a clear-cut case, were it not for a few factors. First, Dr. Ossendowski kept daily journals and even brought back many artifacts from his travels through Mongolia, providing evidence that his journey actually took place. Second, he was investigated by the French philosopher and Vedic scholar René Guénon. Guénon wrote that, quote, "He, Ossendowski, affirmed to us that he had never read St. Yves and did not even know his name. And for our part, we have no reason to doubt his sincerity." However, Guénon was not satisfied with his investigation. He contacted his Eastern colleagues for more information. 2 years later, he compiled them in his own book, The King of the World, a book that specifically examines the legend of Agartha. Conclusively, Guénon stated, "Independently of the evidence provided by Ossendowski, we know from other sources that stories of this kind are widely circulated in Mongolia and throughout Central Asia. And we can add that there is something similar in the traditions of almost all peoples." He once again affirmed that the plagiarism accusation against Ossendowski was completely unfounded. Through those 2 years of independent research, Guénon was informed of a vast underground network of caves and tunnels, some running for hundreds of miles. They were said to eventually lead to a true center of world governance. A place described very similarly to the original legend of the island. A place that had survived the rise and fall of civilizations and Earth's catastrophes by hiding deep underground, an inviolable repository containing all the knowledge and wisdom of history. In ancient writings, in whispers passed down through generations, there is a concept that exists on 2 levels: an inner meaning, implying deep understanding, a spiritual journey to achieve enlightenment, and an outer meaning, a much simpler and more astonishing meaning, the notion that it truly exists, a powerful and ancient kingdom permanently hidden beneath the Earth's surface. We often associate the legend of Agartha with the works of 19th century Western occultists. Names like René Guénon, Ferdinand Ossendowski, or Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alvedre. Many believe Agartha is merely a product of romantic imagination, a creation of that era. But what if they didn't create it at all? Even if we decide to dismiss the works of Guénon, Ossendowski, and Saint-Yves, there remain 3 independent sources, proving that the concept and the name Agartha are not a Western invention. The first clear independent source is the manuscripts of Prince Harji Sharif. These notes were written before he met Saint-Yves. They are the only concrete evidence that the term Agartha truly originated from the East. The second source comes from a book written by the historian Louis Jacoliot in 1873. This date is 12 years before Saint-Yves began his Sanskrit lessons, making this the earliest verifiable mention of the underground kingdom. Jacoliot, a judge in Chandanagar, South India, lived there for many years. He had an insatiable desire to collect sacred texts and folk tales from the East to share with the Western world. And in 1873, he wrote of a city of the sun called Asgartha. He described it as being ruled by succeeding Brahmatmas, ancient Indian priest kings until a conquest by an invading force threatened the land 10,000 years ago. 2 years later, in 1875, Jacoliot expanded on his writings about Agartha, and for the first time, he implied that it had been hidden underground. This unknown world, which no human force, even now that the land above has been trampled under Mongol and European invasions, can force to reveal. It is known by the name of the Temple of Agartha. The people who live there possess great powers and have knowledge of all the world's affairs. The third independent mention may even predate Jacoliot. In 1871, the French philosopher and theologian Ernest Renan described Asgard, the city of the gods in Norse mythology, as being located in Central Asia. This is not a confirmed reference, but it is certainly strange to read of a utopian land, so phonetically and geographically close to the one Jacoliot described only 2 years later. These three works, by Harji, Jacoliot, and Renan, when combined, are evidence that Agartha itself is not just a Western fantasy. It may be a legend with much deeper origins in the East. And while the oldest legend may be of an ancient island, our next stop is a close second. The legendary hidden city, Shambhala. For millennia, the belief in a paradise in the Earth's interior has been at the core of nearly every Tibetan tradition. That is Shambhala. References to this kingdom can be found in various ancient texts. In the Hindu Vishnu Purana, Shambhala is prophesied as the birthplace of Kalki, the 10th and final avatar of the god Vishnu. But it is most detailed in the Tibetan Kalachakra, an ancient and foundational Buddhist text, a text that, according to legend, was taken from Shambhala itself. However, the kingdom's influence only begins to show when we realize that it actually predates Tibetan Buddhism. Its existence has been confirmed to extend from the vanished Zhangzhung culture, as well as being mentioned in the Bon scriptures under the name Tagzig Olmo Lung Ring. Shambhala is famously the land of 1,000 names. It is called the Forbidden Land, the land of white waters, the land of radiant spirits, and the land of sacred fire. The Chinese call it the Western Paradise of Shiwangmu, Queen Mother of the West. For the old believers in Russia, it is the Kingdom of Opona. Hindus call it Aryavartha, the land of the worthy. And perhaps it is also the Agartha of Saint-Yves. Consider this. According to Saint-Yves, the name Agartha means inviolable by violence. Shambhala is a Sanskrit word, meaning place of peace. This is only the first similarity. The line of distinction begins to blur when we learn that Shambhala is also said to be located deep inside the earth, a lush valley with a beautiful city, where extraordinary people live, isolating themselves from the outside world. It is ruled by a benevolent and powerful king. It is a place where love and wisdom reign, a place where humans are immune to suffering, desire, and old age. Furthermore, Shambhala is always spoken of as a real place. This hidden kingdom is said to be located in the mountainous regions of the Eurasian continent, often envisioned as a vast inhabited cave complex located beneath the Himalayas. Some legends say the entrance to Shambhala is hidden inside a certain abandoned monastery in a remote valley. It may also be a significant detail, although difficult to verify due to the text's mysterious nature, that some writers over the years have claimed that the word Agartha appears in the scripture about Shambhala in 1774, written by the 6th Panchen Lama. Perhaps the most important popularizer of the Shambhala legend in the West was the controversial Russian occultist and philosopher Helena Blavatsky. She studied in Tibet under the tutelage of lamas from 1868 to late 1870. Eventually, she traveled throughout Asia in search of information about Shambhala, and especially its connection to the legend of the island north of the Himalayas. In the notes and journals published after her death, we see that Blavatsky investigated a collection of ancient books, preserved in the modern-day Fujian province of China. She described this place as the headquarters of the Aboriginal Chinese. Many ancient texts there regarded the Tibetan region as the great center of occult learning in ancient times. Here resided the teachers of light, the children of wisdom, terms used to refer to those proficient in the esoteric doctrine taught by the inhabitants of the sacred island. Blavatsky wrote vividly as follows: "As for the legends related to this island, besides the historical records of it kept in the sacred books of China and Tibet, this legend remains alive to this day among the Tibetan populace. The beautiful island is no more, but the country where it once blossomed still remains. And this location is well known to some of the great masters of the snowy range, no matter how much its topography was transformed and changed by the terrible cataclysm. According to common belief, it is located in northwest Tibet. Some place it in the unexplored central regions. Others claim it lies between the Gangdisri range and the northern edge of the Gobi Desert. But all believe in Shambhala and speak of it as a fertile, fairy-like land, once an island, now an oasis of unparalleled beauty, the meeting place of the heirs of esoteric wisdom, of the divine inhabitants of the legendary island. And such an oasis is said to still exist, underground. Therefore many have searched but never found. The artist and archaeologist Nicholas Roerich undertook a 5-year, 15,000-mile journey at the cost of 5 of his men's lives, in search of Shambhala. In his travel diaries, Roerich wrote that the closest they came to the hidden kingdom was in the Altai Mountains, in the Uimon Valley. There an old sage led them to a small abandoned temple and revealed the entrance to a tunnel, blocked by carefully cut stones. He assured them that Shambhala would reveal itself when the world was ready. Until that day, humanity can only speculate with the great myths of what might exist. As we return to our starting point, after traversing ancient texts and obsessive quests, a few deductions begin to form. First, it is very possible that Agartha is just another name for Shambhala, and Shambhala itself, perhaps, is a direct reference to the legend of the ancient island that once existed. Second, based on millennia of belief and centuries of testimonies, as well as the presence of vast and unexplored caves in the region, if Agartha truly exists, it likely lies beneath the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. Many hydrological examinations conducted by caving expeditions show the existence of large-scale caves beneath the surface. But to date, the majority remains inaccessible, and we know that this majestic mountain range was once the bottom of an ancient ocean. Third, and perhaps this is the strangest, is that on every continent of our planet we find countless legends that tell of deep tunnels leading to a divine hidden civilization underground. Now, we will go around the world and investigate a few of these real mysteries. Let's return to the Cave of the Patriarchs, said to be the gateway to the inner realm of the Garden of Eden. In this cave, many thousands of years old artifacts have been recovered, although no one has been able to venture deeper than the first few chambers. Like the Egyptian pyramids, it is believed there are many hidden rooms and passages, still undiscovered. The currently known chambers were found by moving stones and obstacles. One room was revealed by removing a specific square stone, marked differently from others nearby. Due to the cave's religious significance, access to these caverns is almost always forbidden, even to archaeologists. Only during times of political turmoil have we been able to explore and collect artifacts. Only 2 entrances are known, and both are sealed. We truly do not know how deep this cave system goes. In Mayan mythology, there is an underworld called Xibalba. the land where the sun descends. It is said to be inhabited by godlike people, and their civilization is believed to have vanished before recorded history. The Mayan holy book, the Popol Vuh, describes actual structures and places said to be part of Shambhala and places its entrance in Guatemala. Today in Guatemala, an incredible 500-mile, about 800 kilometers tunnel system has been mapped beneath the Maya pyramid complex known as Tikal. There remains a mystery as to how 500,000 Maya escaped the decline of their culture. Modern researchers believe the key lies in these tunnels. In Mexico, 11 underground stone temples and an ancient subterranean road have been found. And in May 2020, archaeologists discovered a 10-meter deep secret tunnel beneath the Pyramid of the Moon in Teotihuacan, using subsurface imaging technology. No one has been able to enter the tunnel, or even find the entrance. In Egypt, ancient historians repeatedly mentioned a network of passages, connecting the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, and other underground sites. In particular, a giant underground city of the gods, with 3,000 lavishly decorated rooms. In the 5th century BC, the Greek historian Herodotus wrote the following. 1. There I saw 12 palaces regularly disposed, which had communication with each other, interspersed with terraces and arranged around 12 halls. It is hard to believe they are the work of men. The walls are covered with carved figures, and each court is exquisitely built of white marble, surrounded by a colonnade. Near the corner where the labyrinth ends, there is a pyramid 240 feet, 73 meters high, and an underground passage by which one can enter. This claim was reinforced 500 years later by a similar account from the Greek historian Strabo. However, this city of the gods has not yet been found. It is a fact that the Giza Plateau has a huge underground system, a combination of man-made tunnels, natural caves, and underground rivers, which has been continuously discovered and mapped since 1978. And in ancient times, Giza was known as Rostau, which literally means mouth of the passages, a direct reference to the entrance to the underworld in Egyptian mythology. Early Indian religions, especially Jainism, Hinduism, and Buddhism, believe in an underworld called Patala. It literally means that which is below the feet. This realm is described as being filled with splendid jewels, beautiful groves, and lakes. Sweet aromas and music fill the air, and the ground one walks on is often covered in gold. Like Shambhala, Patala is believed to be a real place. In the surface world, caves guarded by spiritual beings called asuras are said to be the entrances to Patala. And perhaps most interesting, the inhabitants of Patala are the Nagas, a race of demigods, half human, half serpent, who can sometimes take human form. Rituals dedicated to the Nagas have taken place across South Asia for at least 2,000 years. They are described as rich, powerful, and proud beings, associated with water, rivers, lakes, and seas. They are guardians of treasure, both material and immaterial. Outside of India, you will find a strong belief in the Nagas in Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Every one of these cultures links the Nagas with a race of serpent-like demigods living underground. We could even argue that ancient Chinese legends of dragons, Long, are a reference to the Nagas, as they look suspiciously similar. They are said to be wise and powerful creatures, advisors to kings. According to Chinese mythology, there are two races of dragons associated with the earth: the Fuzanglong, underworld dragons who guard treasure, and the Delong, earth dragons who live underground and control the flow of water. These two associations are perfectly parallel to the Nagas. There is a fundamental connection that I believe exists between Shambhala and the inner world of the Nagas, Patala, and by extension, Agartha. From the simplest perspective, both are described as incredibly splendid civilizations located deep underground. In addition, they are inhabited by a race that is spiritually, intellectually, and physically advanced, guardians of treasure in many forms. One of those treasures is lost knowledge. Of course, both are said to be located around the same geographical area, with access points supposedly found in the caves of the Himalayan mountains. The legends of both realms are older than written history, and their mythologies are deeply embedded in both Hindu and Buddhist scriptures, Patala being primarily a Hindu concept, and Shambhala a Buddhist one. It is also fascinating to note that Saint Eve, as I mentioned earlier, was fond of the detail that the people of Agartha had 2 tongues, so they could speak 2 languages simultaneously. When we consider the forked tongue of a serpent, the Nagas could be the Agarthans. This brings us back to the time of those fateful Sanskrit lessons, as there is one final mystery to ponder. A twist in the story, the so-called mysterious second Indian of the great Agarthan school, who contacted Alexandre Saint-Yves. In 1935, Jean Rayor, an influential French esoteric scholar and a close associate of René Guénon, asserted that a secretive Hindu sect had sought a suitable student of Western origin to impart long-forgotten doctrines, and they had specifically chosen Saint-Yves as their ideal vessel. They sent the Afghan prince, Harji Sharif, to transfer this knowledge. Rayor later expanded on the details in 1948, writing that, afterward, Saint-Yves was in contact with a Hindu, much more serious than Harji Sharif, who came from northern India. Evidence of this second Indian is corroborated in Saint-Yves' own notes. There he refers to one of his notebooks as the secret doctrine of the Brahmins, communicated to me by the Rishi Bhagwandas Raji Shreen. This was undoubtedly the more serious guru Jean Rayor wrote about. This particular notebook connects the 22 letters of the Vatanian alphabet with Hebrew and Sanskrit roots, but apparently, at some point, the project did not go as planned. The second Indian determined Saint-Yves was unworthy. He and Harji stopped the teachings, leaving Saint-Yves with an incomplete understanding of the doctrines, a deficit he spent the rest of his life trying to understand, as seen in the obsessive, speculative nature of his final work, the Archaeometer. But why was Saint-Yves chosen in the first place? The leading theory relates to his groundbreaking work, The Mission of the Jews. In the preface of the book, Saint-Yves wrote extensively about a letter, written by, in his words, one of the branches of the Great Brotherhood of the Himalayas. This letter was, in fact, one of the famous Mahatma letters, written by Mahatma Kuthumi and Maurya. If we turn back the clock 5 years, the occultist Helena Blavatsky had moved to India, where she met the Tibetan Mahatmas. They wanted to conduct a 7-year experiment to see if the West would be receptive to the wisdom the East had to offer. They chose 2 of Blavatsky's associates as initiates, one of whom was the Anglo-Indian newspaper editor, Alfred Percy Sinnett. Over time, however, the Mahatmas became disillusioned with how Sinnett's Western prejudices distorted their doctrines. The same story seems to have repeated with Saint-Yves. Like Sinnett, he appears to have been chosen for his rising career as a writer, and like Sinnett, he failed. Saint-Yves was ultimately shackled by his own prejudices. Despite deeply respecting the East, he wrote in The Mission of India that the world of Agartha will be accessible to all humanity when Christianity lives according to the commandments of Moses and God. In his final work, he declared that India would eventually need to be converted to a Christian and Catholic order. Jean Rayor stated the problem best. It seems that Westerners cannot give up not being superior to the rest of the world. So, what are we left with in the end? The great Agarthan school, from which Harji and the second Indian came, may have existed, but as an extremely secret and closed group. The strange Vatanian alphabet was clearly developed, not primitive, but still tied to esoteric activities. And as for the big question, does an inner kingdom like Agartha, Shambhala, or Patala really exist? Was the island that once lay in the ocean of the Gobi Desert real? There is no certain proof, only a strange collection of myths spanning continents and ages that truly makes us wonder. And considering that both the deserts, as well as the Himalayan mountains, are among the most inhospitable and unexplored places on Earth, there is no doubt that there is still much waiting to be discovered right beneath our feet. Conventional wisdom tells us that the Earth is basically a solid sphere, a solid iron core encased in a layer of molten iron, followed by a harder mantle, and finally the crust where we live. This is the almost universally accepted theory, regarded as an absolute truth, but it is also just an educated guess. There is no solid evidence to prove it. The truth is, we have never come close, not even a little, to the center of the Earth. With that in mind, theories suggesting the Earth is actually hollow and even capable of supporting life should logically be treated as equally as that widely accepted theory. However, as you can guess, most scoff at this idea. They dismiss it completely without further investigation. But throughout history, many brilliant and respected minds, thinkers, scientists, and even military veterans, have presented detailed theories about what lies deep inside our planet. When these theories are combined with countless ancient reports and texts that mention living beings and entire civilizations existing, and sometimes emerging from within the Earth, they seem to not only warrant further study, but when viewed with an unbiased mind, they suggest there may be more evidence supporting the hollow Earth theory than we think. Interestingly, both sides of the spectrum seem to agree that the Earth's moment of inertia indicates a concentration of mass around the very center of the planet. Seismic data also seems to suggest this mass is a solid sphere. Hollow Earth theories differ on what exactly that mass is. Some suggest it could be a magnetic core. Others propose that it is a central sun. This is particularly fascinating, as modern science also seems to suggest the Earth's core could indeed be as hot as our sun. In ancient times, Buddhists believed the Earth was hollow. They believed it contained a race of superhumans who would venture to the surface through tunnels. It is said that Buddhists even posted guards at the entrances to these tunnels leading to the inner Earth, supposedly in Tibet. In other Tibetan, Indian, and Hindu texts, an ancient kingdom called Shambhala is described as being deep in the interior of Asia, while other texts from India, such as the Ramayana, speak of the avatar Rama, a great blue being who came from deep within the earth. In the 1600s, as Western cultures began to emerge from the Dark Ages, where science and free thought were frowned upon by the Catholic Church, many scientists and philosophers were murdered by the Church for being considered heretics. Despite that threat, there were brilliant and influential figures who came to their own conclusions about whether the earth was hollow. Although they were no longer forced to operate in secret under the threat of death, they were still monitored very closely by the social elite. Edmund Halley, perhaps most famous for discovering Halley's Comet, was just one of those who theorized that the earth was indeed hollow. Using much of Isaac Newton's work on gravity to prove his theory, he claimed that the earth was hollow and had a crust about 500 miles thick. He said it had an innermost core and was capable of supporting life. He went on to say that an atmosphere filled the space inside the earth, Both the outer crust and the inner core had their own magnetic poles, causing them to rotate at different speeds. Leonhard Euler, a great Swiss physicist and mathematician, also proposed that the Earth was hollow during his time in the 1700s. Like Halley, he claimed the Earth had a very thick outer crust, but at its core was a central sun. This sun, he claimed, provided heat and light for the inhabitants of the inner Earth. Interestingly, Euler went on to claim that the inner Earth could be accessed through enormous entrances at both the North and South poles. Today, some claim that applications like Google Earth have deliberately hidden these entrances. Despite this, there are still some photographs that seem to show the opening Euler claimed. But perhaps no claim of an inhabited inner world is as high-level and sensational as those made in the 1940s by a distinguished U.S. Navy admiral immediately following a top-secret military operation. For thousands of years, amidst the countless undiscovered ruins on the seabed, one name has always resonated, the greatest legend of all, challenging the boundary between myth and history: Atlantis. While much of the ocean floor remains a mystery, ancient sages seem to know of this island's existence. Nearly all of our initial knowledge of Atlantis comes from a single source: the great Greek sage Plato. In his dialogues, written around 360 BC, Plato depicted Atlantis not as a vague myth, but as a real power, a mighty empire with an astonishing level of civilization. He described it as a perfectly planned city, with walls and canals built in concentric circles, a masterpiece of engineering and architecture. In its time, Atlantis flourished, far surpassing all contemporary civilizations. According to Greek mythology, the city's origin is linked to the gods themselves. Legend tells that Atlantis was originally an island chosen and built by Poseidon, the god who rules the sea. As we have hypothesized before, the gods in mythology could very well be extraterrestrial beings, possessing advanced technology that ancient humans could not explain, and thus regarded them as supernatural beings. Poseidon, in this legend, fell in love with a beautiful mortal maiden named Cleito. To protect his lover and their children, he used his power to turn the island into an impregnable fortress. Here, Cleito bore Poseidon 5 pairs of twin sons. These 10 sons jointly inherited the great kingdom, and the eldest, named Atlas, became the first king of Atlantis. From then on, the island and the ocean surrounding it were named after him. The sons of Poseidon, demigods carrying the blood of the sea and the earth, built a utopian civilization. They built a massive, magnificent temple to honor their father. The center of the temple was a solid gold statue of Poseidon, standing on a chariot pulled by winged horses, so majestic and vivid it seemed to be truly controlling the wild waves. This temple was sheltered by a spiral dome, so high it pierced the clouds. Poseidon also built a separate palace for Cleito, surrounded by vast canals, wide enough for the mightiest fleets of ships to pass through. The city was protected by concentric walls, built with special red, white, and black stones, quarried right on the island. They were lavishly decorated with rare, precious metals. Atlantis was a fertile and bountiful land, a self-sufficient place. Farmers cultivated the vast plains, using a complex and efficient irrigation system. They built magnificent buildings themselves, found and crafted many rare metals, even a strange alloy, emitting a brilliant red light that Plato called orichalcum. Precious crystals like diamonds were widely used, not just for jewelry, but also for entertainment and technological purposes that we cannot yet fully understand. The inhabitants of Atlantis were believed to possess powers and technologies far beyond our imagination. They had the ability to control the weather, manipulate volcanic eruptions, and possessed sophisticated devices that allowed them to harness energy from the cosmos, energy that legend describes as fire from the stars. but absolute power often comes with arrogance. According to Plato, after many generations, the divine bloodline was gradually diluted. The Atlanteans, in their intoxication with power, failed in their attempt to invade Athens. And then, nature's punishment, or perhaps that of the gods, struck. Plato recounted that in just one fateful day and night, terrible earthquakes and horrific floods struck the island. The catastrophe struck with unstoppable force, destroying and sinking the entire city, along with the great island, to the bottom of the deep ocean. Plato's story ends abruptly, leaving a mystery that has lasted for 2 millennia. Was this just an allegory created by Plato to teach humanity about arrogance? Or was he recording a real historical memory? A civilization wiped from the earth? And if Atlantis truly existed, the biggest question that has tormented the minds of scientists and seekers for generations is, where does that legendary city lie today? For centuries, the question of Atlantis remained an enigma. Countless explorers and scholars dedicated their lives to searching for even the smallest piece of evidence. But the island remained silent. This silence was so profound that many began to question whether Plato, the great sage, had merely created an allegory, a lesson to warn the people of his time about arrogance and its consequences. Did Atlantis never exist beyond those pages? The answer began to emerge on a fateful day in 1968. Archaeologist Manson Valentine, while flying over the shallow waters off the north coast of Bimini Island in the Bahamas, stumbled upon an extraordinary structure. Just beneath the clear water, only about 4 to 5 meters deep, a massive stone road appeared, clearly visible. This discovery, initially, did not make a big splash. The scientific community assumed it was merely a natural rock formation, possibly eroded limestone, formed and accumulated over billions of years of geological activity. But as other scientists began to dive and explore this structure directly, they realized something astonishing. These stones did not seem to be naturally formed. They were too square, too neatly arranged. Imagine megalithic blocks, some up to 5 meters long, carefully placed. A few blocks seemed to be propped on top of other blocks intentionally, and stranger still, they found smaller shim stones inserted into the gaps, apparently to create balance and stability. The sharp edges, the calculated parallelism. This was not random. Mother Nature, in all her wondrous creations, never arranges stones this way. A bold speculation was put forward. This Bimini Road was a man-made structure. Someone, or some intelligent creature, had arranged them here for a clear purpose. As they expanded the scope of their research to the entire area, scientists began to dimly perceive a great secret that had been submerged. They were not just looking at a road. When piecing the data together, a larger picture emerged. This area was actually an ancient harbor, and the stones they initially studied were part of a breakwater, a complex engineering structure built to protect a coastal city from the ocean's wrath. This result made everyone truly excited. They knew they hadn't just found a few strange rocks. They had discovered a torn-out chapter of history, a previously unknown civilization. Following the currents along the stone road, archaeologists continued to find more interesting and complex structures. They discovered what appeared to be the foundations of buildings, U-shaped structures, and other paths, all eroded, covered by sand and coral. This entire massive construction bore the resemblance of the ruins of an ancient city. The question immediately sprang to their minds. Could these discoveries in the waters of Bimini be the ruins of the ancient continent of Atlantis that Plato described? Its location, right on the edge of the Atlantic, was a perfect fit. And if so, if this was truly part of the lost empire, then these submerged routes, could they be leading to other sites, larger cities, grander pyramids, still buried somewhere beneath the sand and water of the Caribbean? The search had only just begun. And the next answer came not from Bimini, but from another location at a much more incredible depth off the coast of Cuba. If the Bimini Road was just a hint, a trace in shallow water, the next discovery took us into a completely different realm, a depth almost unimaginable for ancient structures. In 2000, while conducting a routine seafloor mapping mission off the western coast of Cuba, an exploration team led by oceanographer Pauline Zalitsky stumbled upon the unbelievable. Their sonar scanning equipment recorded strange signals. Hidden deep below, at a depth of over half a mile or about 700 meters, enormous stone structures with perfect symmetry appeared on the screen. This was a depth that conventional diving equipment could not possibly reach. The pressure there could crush a military submarine. The team was forced to use a remotely operated vehicle, ROV, a robot equipped with high-resolution cameras and sophisticated mechanical arms, controlled from a safe engineering room on the ship's deck. What the robot sent back were not just images, but a real shock to the scientific world. In the eternal darkness of the seabed, they discovered a vast urban complex. These were giant blocks of stone, some 400 meters wide and 40 meters high, hewn with sharp angles. Many large stones were stacked on top of each other with precision, showing clear signs of an artificial structure. All the scientists present at the time agreed this could not be a natural formation. They found perfectly straight lines, stretching for kilometers like ancient avenues. And most astonishing of all, the expedition discovered massive architectural blocks bearing clear pyramidal shapes. It is estimated that about 30 geometric structures were found, including what looked like streets, public buildings, and even tunnels, all submerged under 700 meters of water. Based on the presence of nearby volcanic ash, scientists proposed a preliminary date estimate that would stun anyone who heard it. This city seemed to have sunk underwater over 6,000 years ago. This discovery posed a perplexing question. If this was an artificial city, then which civilization built it? And how could they have done it even before the first Egyptian pyramids were thought to have been started? When archaeologists compared these images with the remaining ruins on land, they noticed an astonishing similarity in architecture, a direct link to another mysterious civilization, the Maya. When observing the underwater photographs from Cuba, one cannot help but think of the majestic pyramid complexes on the Yucatan Peninsula or other regions of Mexico. It seems there is a link that has been lost to time. This could explain one of the greatest mysteries of the Mayan civilization. Why did they have no early developmental stage? History seems to record them appearing suddenly, with a complete system of knowledge in science, medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. It's very possible that the Mayan civilization we know were actually just inheritors, descendants of a greater mother civilization, one that had formed and flourished thousands of years prior. Our best connection to the ancient past perhaps lies in the very messages the Maya tried to encode and preserve in their architectural works and artworks. Some researchers believe the Maya were the surviving generation after a great flood or a terrible cataclysm. Disaster struck, submerging their homeland, washing away all their tools and complex machinery. Only a small group of lucky survivors remained. They had to start over from scratch, building a new civilization from zero, carrying with them vague memories of a lost golden age. Evidence for this hypothesis seems to exist in many Mayan cities. When scientists excavate buildings, they often find older, more sophisticated settlements and structures lying just beneath the surface. The first pyramid complexes show an extremely high level of construction technique, but it seems this technique was lost in later generations. Could it be that a global catastrophe destroyed most of the elite, and they had to start over with the most rudimentary means? If this underwater city off Cuba is really 6,000 years old, what could it be? Could it be some part of Atlantis, the island Plato said sank 9,000 to 10,000 years ago? And why do these ruins, from Bimini to Cuba, seem to be concentrated around an area famous for its mystery, the Bermuda Triangle? Antarctica, a vast white land locked beneath eternal ice. For a long time it has been a veil concealing mysteries, a place where the line between reality and legend blurs. There are those who believe that, hidden deep beneath the bone-chilling cold, is a truth that could reshape our world, or destroy it. Throughout the 1970s and into the 80s, whispers began to circulate. Reports of something strange, a huge, mysterious black hole appearing in the skies over the icy continent. One particular satellite photo stirred the public's imagination, seemingly showing a perfect, circular abyss right at the South Pole. However, the naked truth of this photo was less cosmic. It was quickly debunked. That black hole was actually an artifact of the imaging process itself, a shadow cast by the arm of the optical telescope, leaving a circular void right in the middle of the photo of Antarctica. This rational explanation was provided almost immediately, but, as is often the case with great mysteries, the seed of doubt had been planted. This didn't stop conspiracy theorists from claiming it was a massive cover-up. They argued that there was a real hole at the South Pole, a giant portal where flying objects, silver disks, could enter and exit our planet. And of course, the world's governments were keeping this an absolute secret. The truth of the matter is that strange, anomalous holes do exist in Antarctica. Enormous cave systems, unexplored caverns. Could they be entrances to another world? A mysterious realm deep inside the Earth? Who can really know? Today, Antarctica remains an off-the-map location for most of us. Finding reliable information about what truly goes on there seems strangely difficult. Even in the 21st century, with all our computer systems and satellite software, there are areas that are completely blacked out, inaccessible. We have to ask, why is that? The story takes us back to 1945 and the chaotic years that followed. An account, if true, would change everything. A voice, supposedly from an unknown entity, making contact with our race. We have tried to contact your race, but our efforts were met with hostility. Our Flugelrads, flying ships, were shot down. Yes, even pursued by your fighter planes with malice and hatred. That voice, according to legend, delivered a chilling warning to one man. Now, I say to my son, there is a great storm gathering in your world, a dark fury that will not spend itself for many years. There will be no answer in your arms. There will be no safety in your science. It may rage until every flower of your culture is trampled, and all human things are leveled in vast chaos. Your recent war was only a prelude of what is to come for your race. The man who received this message was supposedly Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a war hero, a respected polar explorer. And he replied that no, he was not surprised. He knew that the Earth had gone through a dark age before. Any of us, having had such an experience, would probably go around the world telling our story, despite being considered insane. But Byrd concealed that message. He kept it to himself. Why did he do that? The story goes that when he reported this to his high commanders at the Pentagon, they ordered him to be silent. Even the President of the United States, Harry S. Truman, was fully briefed. The Admiral, being a military man, remained silent, accepting the order of silence in the name of humanity. This raises a foundation-shaking question. Was Admiral Richard E. Byrd a visitor to the hollow Earth? Did the Ariani, the inhabitants of the inner world, grant him entry? Does this mean they can open doors, spatial portals to their domain? To be fair, there are sources that claim his famous diary doesn't exist, that it was the product of writer F. Amedeo Giannini, published in 1957 in the book Worlds Beyond the Poles, where he told the story of Admiral Byrd and brought it to light. But the Byrd legend is just one piece of the puzzle. The concept of an underground world has appeared in mythology, folklore, and legends since ancient times. The idea of an inner world doesn't just originate from the questionable diary of an admiral. It is an ancient memory, an echo reverberating through millennia of human history. The concept of subterranean realms is woven into the very fabric of our mythology and legends. From the Greek Hades, not just a place for the dead, but a tangible kingdom beneath the ground, to the deep beliefs of Tibetan Buddhism. They believe in the existence of an ancient city called Shambhala, an oasis of enlightenment, not on the surface, but hidden deep within the earth. These legends are not just vague tales. They point to specific locations on Earth, places where the veil between our world and the world within is said to be thinnest. From the mysterious city of Urx in Argentina to the deep Los Tayos caves in Ecuador, it is whispered that these are not just vast cave systems, but that they are gateways, corridors leading to an underworld. If we are to believe Admiral Byrd's diary, then the inhabitants of this world, the Ariani, have been observing us for many years. They have sent their flying ships, called Flugelrads, bearing messages of peace. They came to warn us, to get us to take care of our planet before it's too late. But humans, in their fear and instinctive aggression, responded with violence. We opened fire on these messengers. The message of peace was choked by the sound of anti-aircraft fire. Recall the terrifying Battle of Los Angeles on February 25, 1942. Less than 3 months after the United States entered World War II, a massive, mysterious, unidentified flying object hovered over the skies of Los Angeles, causing a full-scale alarm. The military fired thousands of rounds at it, to no avail. Could that have been a Flugelrad? A final, desperate attempt by the Ariani to try and communicate, to prevent the bloodiest conflict in human history? If so, the dialogue between us and the other inhabitants of this world ended, before it even began. Decades have passed since Admiral Byrd's fateful expedition to Antarctica. So, is there any new evidence to support his incredible claims? The answer may be slowly emerging. Recently, there have been whistleblowers stepping out from the shadows, people who claim to have worked on top-secret projects in Antarctica. They speak of stumbling upon strange facilities, structures so technologically advanced that they didn't look like they were made by us. These whispers further fuel speculation about a strange event that took place not long ago. A secret gathering of many high-ranking officials, presidents, top astronomers, brilliant scientists, and even astronauts, right in Antarctica. The question is why? Why would all these great minds gather at the most desolate place on Earth? Was a major discovery found beneath the ice? Something that required their multidisciplinary expertise? Something that might have confirmed Byrd's claims? Did they find it? The lost city? While these stories circulate in the shadows of forums and leaked reports, another search, a scientific one, is happening in broad daylight, and it has just revealed a completely new picture of this mysterious continent. Newly released data from a European satellite has lifted the veil, not on an underground city, but on a giant, tectonic underworld lying deep beneath thousands of meters of ice. This discovery is not the product of a controversial diary, but from an orbiting machine, cold and precise. Its name is GOCE, an acronym for Gravity Field and Steady-State Ocean Circulation Explorer. Launched on March 17, 2009, GOCE was part of the European Space Agency's Living Planet program. Its mission, to measure the pull of Earth's gravity with unprecedented accuracy, From March 2009 to November 2013, it skimmed our atmosphere, mapping the subtle variations in the planet's gravitational field. Using this invaluable data, researchers from Kiel University in Germany and the British Antarctic Survey did something incredible. They used gravity to see through the ice. Their analysis revealed regions of rock, called cratons, in the Earth's lithosphere, the rigid layer located between the planet's crust and mantle. Cratons are the ancient, stable cores of most tectonic plates. They also found origins, regions of folded rock, the precursors to mountain ranges. By studying the number of these cratons and origins, scientists can compare the continental plates beneath Antarctica with other regions around the globe. This new gravity map not only provides a global view, it also reveals local gravity changes with incredible resolution, down to about 50 miles. Fausto Ferraccioli, co-author of the study and lead scientist for geology and geophysics at the British Antarctic Survey, said, "These gravity images are revolutionizing our ability to study the least understood continent on Earth. In East Antarctica, we see an exciting mosaic of geological features, revealing fundamental similarities and differences between the crust beneath Antarctica and other continents. That mosaic tells a story. It shows that East Antarctica is made up of multiple ancient cratons and younger origins, a similar structure found in Australia and India. Meanwhile, West Antarctica has a thinner, more uniform crust, similar to the southern tip of South America. These geological puzzle pieces point to a single past, a past when Antarctica was not an isolated, icy island. The data confirms the continent's history as part of Gondwana, an ancient supercontinent that included the modern-day southern hemisphere continents. This idea is not entirely new. The matching shapes of the West African and East South American coastlines were officially noted by Francis Bacon in 1620. But the detailed theory that all continents were once one great landmass was not proposed until hundreds of years later. In 1912, the German meteorologist and polar research pioneer Alfred Wegener proposed continental drift theory. He believed the continents were slowly drifting around the Earth. He also believed they were all once part of a single supercontinent, which he called Pangaea, from the Greek word for all Earth. According to Wegener, Gondwana was the southern half of this Pangaea supercontinent. Plate tectonic evidence shows Gondwana was formed from continental collisions in the late Precambrian, about 1 billion to 542 million years ago. For millions of years, Gondwana existed as a southern landmass, but the Earth at that time was very different. It was much warmer, and most importantly, there was no Antarctic ice sheet. It was the Jurassic period. Dinosaurs still roamed the Earth, and lush tropical rainforests stretched across lands that are now buried under thousands of meters of ice. Some mystical researchers have even proposed the idea that Gondwana, a vast, warm, long-lost continent, could be the original archetype for the legend of the lost continent of Atlantis, with knowledge of its existence somehow passed down through the ages. This new gravity map provides scientists with deeper knowledge of how the Antarctic continent was formed. But perhaps just as importantly, it tells us what will happen to it in the future. Antarctica is melting, and being aware of its underlying structure can tell us how that will happen, and perhaps how it will recover. In December 2019, a new detailed map of the mountains, valleys, and canyons hidden beneath the Antarctic ice sheet was revealed. It not only changed our understanding of this continent, it also discovered the deepest land ever found on Earth. This project, named Bed Machine Antarctica, was a massive effort led by NASA. It gathered ice movement measurements, seismic data, ice-penetrating radar, and countless other data points from 19 different research institutes dating back to 1967. It includes nearly 1 million miles of radar flight lines. Bed Machine uses a method based on basic physics called mass conservation. By observing the speed of the ice flow and its thickness, scientists can accurately calculate the hidden topography beneath. The result is the most detailed picture ever created of Antarctica's bedrock. It discovered previously unknown topographical features, such as large ridges that protect the glaciers flowing through the transantarctic mountains. And then, it found the impossible. Beneath the Denman Glacier in East Antarctica, Bed Machine discovered the deepest land canyon in the world, an incredible abyss up to 11,000 feet, about 3,500 meters, below sea level. For comparison, the lowest exposed land on Earth, the Dead Sea, is only 1,419 feet below sea level. NASA's new map is a critical resource, helping scientists accurately predict which areas of Antarctica are at the highest risk of sliding into the ocean in the coming decades. But as scientists map the abyss, old questions linger in the shadows. These mapping projects, could they have accidentally discovered something else? A secret Nazi UFO base in Antarctica. It's a fascinating idea, popular in UFO research circles. The concept that a secret Nazi faction escaped after World War II and established an underground base to continue their top-secret flying saucer program. These stories have circulated for decades. This belief has some tenuous basis in reality. The icy continent was indeed of strategic importance, and Germany did conduct an expedition there from 1938 to 1939. It's also no secret that the Germans designed many advanced aircraft at the end of the war, including hints of saucer-like devices. The centerpiece of this whole story often revolves around a mysterious device known as Die Glock, or the Bell, a weapons project rumored to be anything from an experimental anti-gravity device to a weapon of mass destruction. But the true origin of the Nazi UFO base legend may not be so much related to what the Nazis did, but rather stemmed from a series of seemingly inexplicable comments by Admiral Richard E. Byrd himself. Remember, Byrd was a deeply respected American hero, known for his pragmatic views and proven courage. The interview took place in 1947 aboard the USS Mount Olympus, right after he led Operation Highjump. Operation Highjump, which took place from late 1946 to early 1947, was not a simple scientific expedition. It was a heavy military deployment involving dozens of warships, aircraft, and thousands of soldiers. In an interview with the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio, Admiral Byrd stated that it was imperative for the United States to initiate immediate defensive measures against hostile regions, and that those regions could potentially use Antarctica as their base. He added, and these are the words that sparked decades of speculation. I don't want to frighten anyone unduly, but it is a bitter reality that in the event of a new conflict, the United States of America could be attacked by flying objects, objects that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. What led Byrd to make such alarming statements? What threat had he perceived in Antarctica right after the end of World War II? Some have speculated that Operation Highjump was not a training exercise, but that it was a secret battle, a war between U.S. forces and a mysterious group of Antarctic inhabitants who possessed superior technology. After all, what else could have caused Byrd and his entire fleet to hastily retreat from the icy continent? Operation Highjump, a large-scale and extremely well-funded U.S. military expedition, abruptly ended 6 months earlier than planned. This hasty retreat immediately sparked countless theories. One of the most thrilling theories suggested that Admiral Richard Byrd and his forces had encountered a secret Nazi base, along with their advanced flying saucer technology. This theory seemed to perfectly explain Admiral Byrd's own mysterious warning, given shortly after. In an interview with Chile's El Mercurio, Byrd warned of a new threat, of flying objects that could travel from pole to pole at incredible speeds. In the context of a world just emerging from World War II, many immediately linked this to a high-tech Nazi remnant hidden in the ice. However, the truth, as usual, appears to be more complicated. Contrary to the sensational stories, it seems what Byrd was really discussing was the threat of a hostile nation, possibly the Soviet Union, getting to Antarctica and establishing military bases there before the United States. In fact, although the details of it were kept secret for many years, establishing strategic bases was exactly what the American presence in Operation Highjump was aimed at. This was a preemptive move in the geopolitical chess game of the burgeoning Cold War. And as for the expedition's brevity, instead of encountering secret Nazi bases and their weapons, Admiral Byrd and his fleet met a relentless and unconquerable enemy: Mother Nature. Antarctica, in its icy majesty, is an unforgiving land. The brutal conditions during that harsh winter continuously created enormous problems for the operation. In one tragic example in January 1947, a sudden gust of wind caught a helicopter right at takeoff, flinging it straight into the icy ocean. Fortunately, the pilot had a slim chance to escape the deadly waters and was rescued. However, there were many other situations where the soldiers involved were not so lucky. Complications from the extreme weather conditions led to the loss of many lives in just the short time Operation Highjump was underway. The operation was terminated the following February, purely because the weather was worsening, making further activities impossible and too dangerous. But what about Byrd's mysterious claims? If not Nazi UFOs, then what were the flying objects with incredible speed? There was no need for an enemy aircraft, whether standard or exotic, to be present at that time to validate Byrd's comment. Because at the end of World War II, experimental jet engines were already developed, and within just a few short years, aircraft integrating such technology would eventually revolutionize both military and commercial aviation. Admiral Byrd would certainly have known about this. He was speaking of the expectation that any military with a permanent presence in Antarctica could use this strategic location to launch jet aircraft, machines that could reach anywhere on Earth in just a few short hours. It's no wonder he was worried. Antarctica, from a desolate wasteland, could become an ultimate military launch pad. There is another factor worth considering. Were Byrd's claims somewhat sensationalized by the press? Antarctic explorer Paul Sipple, who was present in the region, noted the famous El Mercurio interview. He observed that the reporters aboard the USS Mount Olympus were inflating claims from Byrd's previous expeditions in the area. The focus of this inflation was the so-called Bunger's Oasis. This was a remarkable area of lakes discovered to have uniquely warm temperatures, around 30 degrees Celsius. These lakes contained various types of algae, a stark contrast to the surrounding icy wasteland. Byrd later described the site as a land of blue and green lakes and brown hills, in an endless white ice sheet. He said his crew seemed to have dropped out of the 20th century into an ancient landscape where the land was just beginning to emerge from one of the great ice ages. Byrd called this discovery the most important of the expedition as far as public interest is concerned. Undoubtedly, it was this that led to speculation. Paul Sipple went on to say that the 11 press representatives on the USS Mount Olympus sent dispatches to the outside world describing this oasis as a Shangri-La. They implied it was warmed by a mysterious heat source, one that could support thriving vegetation. It was this press embellishment and exaggeration of a real, but entirely natural, warm oasis that sowed the first seeds. These seeds, falling on the fertile ground of mystery and post-war fear, soon sprouted into a much more incredible story. A story involving not just warm lakes, but hidden valleys, prehistoric creatures, and a secret diary that would change everything. The The press hype over Bunger's oasis, turning it into a mystical Shangri-La, was just the beginning. The real fuel for the fire of speculation came from something even more astonishing: a secret diary supposedly belonging to Admiral Byrd himself. According to this diary, Byrd allegedly wrote, "Beyond the mountain range is a valley with a small river. There is something definitely wrong and abnormal here. We should be over ice and snow. Our navigation instruments are still spinning. The gyroscope is oscillating back and forth." The story grew stranger. Byrd went on to say he could see animals in the valley, among them a living specimen of a woolly mammoth. This shocking discovery, no doubt, fueled other claims related to Byrd's expeditions. The legend began to form that they had discovered a habitable area in Antarctica. Furthermore, a giant cave entrance led them inside the earth, where they met the inhabitants living underground, the so-called hollow earth dwellers. According to the story, Byrd was taken to meet the master of this underworld. This master told Byrd, "We will not delay your mission, and you will be safely escorted back to the surface. But now, Admiral, I will tell you why you were summoned here. Our interest began right after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. At that alarming time, we sent our flying machines, the Flugelrads, disc-shaped aircraft, to your surface world to investigate. We have never before intervened in your race's wars and barbarity, but now we must, for you are interfering with a certain power not intended for man. That is atomic energy. A fantastic story, gripping, cinematic, and unfortunately, clearly proven to be a fabrication. When put in context, the press embellishment of the actual Shangri-La oasis could easily be the root of later claims, not just of a prehistoric oasis, but of flying ships, and eventually, a secret Nazi base. Again, it seems Byrd was making a general statement about the potential use of enemy aircraft in the coming decades. He was warning that if a hostile nation established a base at either pole, they could use this area as a central point to launch attacks against the U.S. continent. In fact, Byrd himself had previously suggested that the U.S. might want to establish such a base at the North Pole. He clearly viewed the geographical poles as strategic military vantage points. Finally, Byrd's phrase, "in the event of a new conflict," further clarifies that his statements were not related to any existing threat, but rather the potential for a future threat from a hostile nation. With World War II still fresh in everyone's minds, many at the time shared similar concerns. Putting all speculation aside, what we are left with is very little basis to believe that Operation Highjump ended early due to the presence of subterranean races, woolly mammoth attacks, or even Nazi flying saucers. However, few would argue that. The various seeds of truth related to Byrd's historical activities have planted themselves in the fertile ground of myth and speculation, taking on a new and fascinating life of their own over the past decades. One of the key researchers in this field is Micah Hanks, author of Magic, Mysticism, and the Molecule. Hanks is fascinated by the growing interest in Antarctica and the talk of secret meetings held there by U.S. presidents, astronauts, and scientists. One of the most recent discussions revolves around the discovery of an ancient civilization buried under the thick ice. There have even been claims of frozen pyramids, with photos published on the internet a few years ago. However, Dr. Mitch Darcy, a geologist at the German Research Center for Geosciences in Potsdam, dampened this excitement. He said, "The pyramid-shaped structures are located in the Ellsworth Mountains, a mountain range more than 400 kilometers long. So it's not surprising that there are rock peaks jutting above the ice. The peaks are clearly composed of rock, and the fact that one specific peak has a pyramid-like shape is just a coincidence. By definition, it is a nunatak, which is simply a rock peak protruding from a glacier or ice sheet. This one has the shape of a pyramid, but that doesn't make it a man-made structure. Pyramid-shaped peaks are very common. The Matterhorn in the Alps and Mount Bullenstendur in Iceland are notable examples. Although there are many harsh truths here, they don't stop the hardline theorists. They continue to believe that Antarctica is home to a slew of secret bases, despite the fact that there is no advantage to having a secret base in Antarctica. Because if there were, the world's governments would already be having a public war over it. And there is no evidence of that at all. It seems all that Antarctica is rich in is natural diversity and scientific opportunities, and may it always be so. Antarctica remains the last fully unknown land on planet Earth. Buried under miles-thick layers of ice, we can only guess what secrets might be residing beneath. Perhaps because of this, there are many conspiracy theories and rumors surrounding the frozen continent, many of which revolve around UFOs and an extraterrestrial presence there, a presence that various governments around the world may even be aware of. And perhaps the best place to start digging into this mystery is to briefly recall the claims surrounding Operation Highjump. The US-led operation, which took place in early 1947, at least officially, was to establish a research base in Antarctica. However, according to some researchers, the story goes much deeper. They claim that after German engineers and scientists were relocated to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip after World War II, the U.S. military learned something incredible. They learned of an established base of the Third Reich in the icy world of Antarctica, a base that coincidentally also had a presence of extraterrestrials. With a clear cover story of establishing a research base, Operation Highjump was launched, led by the respected naval officer, Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, and it is the writings and testimony of Byrd himself that seem to reveal the true and much stranger reason for the mission. On the afternoon of February 19, 1947, Byrd took to the skies on a fateful reconnaissance flight over the frozen continent. However, according to his diary notes, flight logs, and press conferences he would give in the following days and weeks, instead of seeing endless, thick, rugged ice, he found himself looking down at green vegetation. He saw mammoth-like beasts and other animals that he claimed should not have been there. He described in detail seeing a giant entrance in the ground, and as he flew into it, he found himself inside the earth itself. He seemed to be flying over a huge city as he entered a great cavernous opening. And then things got even weirder. Byrd claimed that something took control of his plane. At the same time, a voice came over the radio, welcoming him. He recalled it had a distinct Nordic or Germanic accent. He noticed several circular disc-shaped objects approaching him. His plane was gently brought to the ground. Several tall, blonde-haired men approached his aircraft. His final flight note stated that a voice from outside was ordering him to open the cargo door. According to what he later told the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio, he and his man were escorted to a large building. There, they were served a drink, unlike anything they had ever tasted before. He then claimed to have met with representatives of a race living in the inner earth. They told him he was allowed to enter unharmed because they knew of his noble nature. Byrd further revealed that the atomic bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima had created deep concern within their species about humankind, and that now they felt compelled to intervene if such an event looked likely to happen in the future. Perhaps most alarming, especially in the context of his claim that the inner race felt compelled to intervene in human affairs, was his warning that the U.S. military must prepare for attack from objects that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Whether we should take Byrd at his word or view his claims with a grain of salt remains a debate. Nevertheless, it is perhaps interesting that he was hospitalized just days after his press conference, and furthermore, despite his illustrious reputation, he was never allowed to speak publicly about his experiences again, at least not in an official capacity. In his writings about a decade later, Byrd wrote that he had been ordered to remain silent for the good of humanity. While Byrd's claims are one of the first mysterious events surrounding Antarctica, one of the most recent is no less mysterious or thought-provoking. An event that occurred around the late 1990s or early 2000s, deep beneath Russia's Vostok research facility and an ancient lake buried in darkness for millions of years. Deep beneath Russia's Vostok research station, an even greater mystery awaits. For a long time, scientists had suspected that a massive liquid lake was flowing beneath the miles-thick ice. Ever since the base was first established in 1957, the existence of this vast lake, Lake Vostok, was finally confirmed in 1993, after 3 decades of tests and experiments by both Russian and British scientists. What makes Lake Vostok even more fascinating is that scientists believe its environment, isolated from the surface for millions of years, is very similar to the environment on Europa, one of Jupiter's main moons. Europa, a celestial body that many believe could very well contain life. And it didn't take long for scientists interested in studying Europa to turn their attention to the pristine, dark lake beneath Vostok Station. It also didn't take long for conspiracy theories and leaked documents to find their way into the public domain. The general thrust of these claims was a secret and highly specialized elevator had been painstakingly installed through the thick ice and finally down to the environment below, including Lake Vostok. Furthermore, according to the testimony of a whistleblower who claimed to have worked on the project, Dr. Anton Padalka, who sought refuge in Switzerland after allegedly defecting from the campaign, they had found far more than they bargained for. Padalka claimed the research team had discovered an octopus with 14 arms in the waters of Lake Vostok. This octopus was unlike anything they had ever seen before. According to Padalka, the creature not only appeared to have superior intelligence to a standard octopus, but it could also paralyze a person with its venom from a distance of 150 feet. Even more incredible, it had the ability to change its shape and mimic a number of other aquatic creatures. By the time the research team realized it could also morph into the shape of a human and mimic the crew, it was too late. One of the biologists was torn to shreds by this apparent alien creature. It was eventually captured. Shortly thereafter, Russian military officers arrived at the base and confiscated it. Its whereabouts are now unknown, but the whispers among the crew were that there would be attempts to weaponize the alien DNA of this disturbing aquatic creature. This is what finally led Padalka to publicly reveal what he knew. Of course, there have been many more claims of strange and suspicious goings-on all over Antarctica as the 2000s unfolded. Many have claimed to have discovered anomalous facilities and even crashed UFOs using Google Earth. And while some of these are more convincing than others, they are all fascinating. But without a doubt, one of the most thought-provoking and disturbing claims regarding unusual activity related to potential alien bases in Antarctica actually hit the tabloids in 2016. Following the claims of archaeologist Jonathan Gray, Gray claimed that he was in possession of video footage filmed in Antarctica by an American television crew from California who had gone missing since 2002, shortly after the footage was shot. Gray put forward that the video showed breathtaking ruins of the icy continent, as well as an intense U.S. military presence. Furthermore, this same unit appeared to be engaged in archaeological activity at the site of the ruins. For their part, the military in the region denied any such activity or any knowledge of the missing television crew. However, Gray insisted there was a massive archaeological excavation taking place at a depth of about 2 miles beneath the icy surface, and more importantly, that the U.S. authorities were using every power possible to prevent the video's broadcast, as it would clearly show this. What does this mean for the claims of Richard Byrd? Could his revelations be far more accurate and authentic than many imagine? And could the human presence in Antarctica since the end of World War II not be one of pure scientific research, but one of using research as a shield to protect the few curious eyes in this region from witnessing discoveries and revelations that would not only change human history, but could alter our collective future? And above all, what are these ruins of great cities? Who lived there? And when might we discover that, beneath the thick ice, these cities are the very ruins of Atlantis? Could the catastrophe that befell the legendary civilization have been part of a pole shift that sent this continent suddenly hurtling across the Atlantic to the southern regions? Could the presence of this advanced civilization explain the mysterious pyramid of this mysterious continent? All of this is speculation. There is no doubt about that, but it is speculation that is certainly warranted for a location so mysterious, protected, and off limits to most everyone. And that speculation will continue for the foreseeable future, or until the secrets of the seventh continent are revealed to all.